Hi guys, how are you today? Welcome back to my channel Adventures in America. If you are new to my channel, my name is Jocelyn, and for today's topic we are going to discuss the new requirement of a COVID vaccine for US immigrants is starting October 1st. But before we get started, please like this video, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I always welcome new subscribers. Now, who are considered as immigrants for purposes of this COVID-19 vaccine? Applicants are defined as people applying for immigrant or refugee status, and also this is applicable for non-immigrants who are required to have a medical exam abroad or overseas and are medically screened days or weeks prior to travel to the US. So what if you have a negative COVID test at the time of your medical screening abroad? For example, you're applying for a K1 visa and during your medical exam you already have a negative test. Under this rule, a negative screening for COVID-19 at the time of the medical evaluation does not guarantee that the applicant will not have COVID-19 at the time of immigration to the US. When is this rule effective? So this rule of COVID-19 requirement is effective October 1st until determined by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention or CDC that this requirement is no longer necessary. This means that this rule is not permanent. This is only imposed during the pandemic, and once the pandemic is over, the CDC will have the option of removing this requirement for US immigrants in the future. Now, what vaccines are required? If a COVID-19 vaccine is listed for emergency use by the World Health Organization or licensed or authorized by the US Food and Drug Administration or FDA, and this vaccine is available to the applicant in the country where the medical examination is conducted, the eligible applicant must complete the COVID-19 series in addition to the other necessary vaccines. So let me provide an explanation to this one. I entered the US on a K1 visa. When I entered the US in the Philippines, I was required to do a medical examination and I was also required to have vaccines. So you will first be required to have a COVID-19 vaccine, and after the series of the COVID-19 vaccine, then you will have the routine or the commonly required vaccine. Now, during your medical examination, if you have a symptom, then you should postpone your medical examination and also require a negative test before going to your medical exam abroad. The rule is that all applicants with symptoms of COVID-19 should be tested for COVID-19 and must postpone the immigrant visa medical examination until they have met recovery criteria to end isolation. Also, if you are a close contact of a person with COVID-19, you must also isolate. Now, what is the COVID-19 vaccination requirement? Under the US Advisory Committee, COVID-19 vaccine is recommended for age-appropriate population. So, in the US, if the vaccine is required for certain ages, then it will also be required for certain US immigrants to the US. Now, what vaccines are approved for purposes of this rule? The vaccines approved are those authorized for emergency use by the World Health Organization or approved for emergency use by the US Food and Drug Administration. I will send the link below in my description which vaccines are considered for emergency use by the World Health Organization and by the US FDA. This is the most important requirement. The COVID-19 vaccination requirement will differ from the previous requirements in that the entire vaccine series, 1 or 2 doses depending on formulation, must be completed in addition to the other routinely required vaccines. Okay, for example, if you have a Pfizer vaccine, day 0 first dose of Pfizer, and then day 21 you get the second dose, and then also on day 21 you will also be required to do the other routine vaccinations for US immigrants. So in this manner, the routine vaccinations other than COVID-19 will be required after you get the COVID-19 vaccine. Now let's talk about the blanket waivers. So what are blanket waivers? So this means that there are requirements to be met in order for you to be exempted or not be required to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Applicant is younger than the lowest age limit for the approved COVID-19 vaccine formulations in use. The blanket waiver should be documented. This means that if they're only allowed certain age requirement to get the COVID vaccine and the applicant is below that age, then you will have to document the blanket waiver. If in the country where the exam is performed, there is an age restriction, for example, the vaccine is only being given to people over the age of 65, and the applicant is younger than 65, then this blanket waiver should be documented. Another blanket waiver is contraindication. What does it mean? If an applicant has contraindication or precaution to the approved COVID-19 vaccine formulation available, the contraindicated reason should be documented and the vaccine should not be administered. This means that if the applicant has a severe reaction to the vaccine on the first dose, this blanket waiver must be documented. Blanket waiver is that the vaccine is not routinely available. So this means that if none of the vaccines are routinely available in the country where the panel physician practices, the not routinely available reason should be documented. If an approved COVID-19 vaccine is available to the applicant but limited supply would cause significant delay to receive it, then the situation would also be considered not routinely available. Also, there are other reasons why the applicant will not get the vaccine. First, the applicant may request a waiver based on religious or moral grounds. What does it mean? So if an applicant objects to vaccination based on religious or moral convictions, it must be documented that the applicant is requesting an individual waiver based on religious or moral convictions. So that means this is not a blanket waiver. So this is based on individual preference. Now, the applicant will have to submit a waiver request to USCIS or U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. USCIS will determine if this type of waiver is granted and not by the panel physician or CDC. The second reason for not getting the vaccine is that the applicant refuses in part or in whole the COVID-19 vaccine. So if an applicant refuses one or more doses of an approved COVID-19 vaccine series that is medically appropriate for and available to the applicant, it should also be documented that the vaccine requirements are not complete and that the applicant refuses vaccination. This applicant is Class A and is inadmissible to the US. So if you refused a vaccine, even though it is medically appropriate for you and available, you may be considered inadmissible to the US. Now, let's talk about the rules when you arrive at your medical examination with symptoms of COVID-19. Applicants who arrive for the exam with clinical signs and symptoms of COVID-19 should receive a nucleic acid amplification test if possible. So antigen testing should not be used during the panel physician exam. So what will happen if you have symptoms of COVID during your medical exam? The rule is that applicants with symptoms of COVID must be required to have isolation period before returning for the exam, even if you receive a negative COVID-19 test result. So, until the applicant has met the criteria to end isolation, the applicant will be Class A, inadmissible for COVID-19. Now, what will be the reasons for your inadmissibility to the US even if you completed all the required documents based on this rule? First, if you lack the required COVID-19 vaccination, and second, if you have been exposed to COVID-19. So if you are exposed to COVID, you must have a negative test and you must complete the isolation requirement. Otherwise, you will not be admitted in the US. Now, what is the required quarantine requirements for purposes of this rule? If you are a US immigrant and you are having symptoms of COVID-19, you must isolate or quarantine for 14 days or you must stay home for 14 days. Otherwise, if you did not complete your isolation period or if it's shortened, you will not be admitted in the US. I will provide in my description below the complete rule for this COVID-19 requirement. Again, thank you guys for tuning into my channel. And if you have any other questions or comments, please post them down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you guys for watching. I hope everyone is staying safe and have a great day.